Howdy.
Hi.
Welcome to Hugo Girl, the podcast, where we read science fiction novels, usually ones that have won the Hugo Award, but sometimes not. And today we're reading one that didn't, because this is a special. We did a fundraiser for abortion care providers a couple months ago, and a bunch of people made donations. Thank you so much. And then we did a drawing from the people who made donations, and our friend Steven won, and he selected today's reading. So today we're going to be talking about Stars in My Pocket, Like Grains of Sand by Samuel R. Delany.
Yay, Steven.
Also, we raised $2,000.
Yay, everybody.
Everybody did so good.
Also, I'm Lori.
I'm Haley.
I'm Amy.
And this comes a little too late.
There are three of us.
That's okay.
Not just two.
Yeah.
Which two? We'll never know.
There's four of us, but you'll never hear from the other one.
On that
Keep
subject.
them in a closet.
So we have a couple new reviews, my favorite.
Yay.
The first one is from Jazz Hands 35, and it's 5 stars. If it wasn't 5 stars, I wouldn't be reading it.
I would love to see a 1-star review actually one day. It'll happen.
Yeah,
With-
someone
with
actually
some
wrote
content,
something.
with
Yeah,
some content.
sometimes I see like you can tell the little like bar on Apple Podcasts that someone just like clicked 2 stars but didn't write anything, and I'm like, show yourself.
Don't be a coward.
All right. So Jess Hands 35 says, by far my favorite book podcast. It really feels like listening to a group of friends. The insights are plentiful. The tangents are many. The fun is contagious.
Woohoo.
Also, after binging 34 episodes over the last week or so, I've only now found out that there are 3 hosts, not 4. Every now and then Kevin hops on. Sometimes there's a 4th
I wonder
host.
which one of us sounds like 2 people.
I don't know. Is there a ghost? Okay. Then there's another one from YB Normal 50. And 5 stars, pure nerd awesomeness. This is my new favorite podcast. Discovered it in the run-up to Chicago Worldcon, where Hugo Girl was nominated for yep, you guessed it, Hugo Award.
We were.
I have run through the entire back catalog. Wow. Lori, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
a lot of hours.
I know. It blows my mind that someone like listened to us talk for that many hours. Like, I think I'm annoying. So this kind of thing makes me feel great. Okay. Lori, Amy, and Haley are often hilarious and always on point. Also, shout out to Kevin, who must spend hours editing out the giggles. Truth. Seriously, though, this is the book club podcast that you wish you were part of. I just wish they read faster so I had more of their nerdy goodness to geek out on. I also wish I read faster.
Never going to happen. I
Yeah.
read so slow.
Yeah.
I've been reading this book since Worldcon.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I mean, this is a toughie.
Yeah, this is not like reading an airport book.
That's true.
No.
This is definitely not an airport book.
Okay. Are we ready to dive in? Dive into the stars in my pocket, which are like grains of sand.
Touch them in your pocket in your shame, and they will poke into your fingers, and you will look. There's a whole thing. There
There are some long sentences. Okay. So, as I said, our friend Stephen Rosiski requested this book. Stephen is an assistant professor in the English department at California Polytechnic State University, so he's very smart. He wrote me
He's got bona fides.
He does. He wrote me a very smart email about this book, and I was like, whew, okay. I asked him for some thoughts about it, just like, so we would touch on things that were important to him. And if the roles had been reversed, I would have sent bullet points. He sent me a very thoughtful email that I genuinely enjoyed reading.
I don't know if that's true, Lori. I think you would have sent something. I think you would have sent something thoughtful.
Okay, well, it wouldn't have been this thoughtful. I enjoyed reading it, actually. We'll get to this, but I, in a lot of ways, enjoyed reading about this book more than I enjoyed reading the book.
That's in my. Did you like it?
Is that your theme?
Yes.
I bet if somebody asked you to talking about thoughts about Misty of Chincoteague, you would have written an expansive essay that was heartwarming and sweet.
Well, all right. No lies detected. Okay. So Stephen is a professor, smart guy. His areas of academic interest, among other things, include sexuality, queer theory, women's and gender studies, pornography, and a bunch of other cool stuff. Stephen published his own book in January of this year.
Okay,
Amazing.
come through, Stephen.
Yep. The title is called Vulgar Genres, Gay Pornographic Writing, and Contemporary Fiction. And he's also our friend.
It's true.
I would like to know his thoughts on Samuel R. Delany's Hog.
What?
Do you know about this?
No.
All right, we'll get there.
Oh Okay.
Not his personal hog. It's a work. It's a work. It's an artwork.
Do you mean his Harley Davidson?
Let's just only talk in metaphor throughout this.
Dick euphemisms only.
Penis parade.
Oh, yes.
All right. So this book did not win any awards that I am aware of, but in 1986, science fiction author, editor, and critic Dave Langford described it as, quote, brilliant, uneven, insufferable, an important piece of science fiction.
That's
And I think that's great.
perfect.
Yeah, this is a work of genius that is often challenging to read.
Yes.
So for a little context, this book was supposed to be the first book of a diptych, which is a 2-book series.
A duology.
A duology.
There you go.
It was supposed to be followed by a novel titled The Splendor and Misery of Bodies of Cities.
I mean, these titles, though.
So that title comes from something, a French something that I couldn't remember, and I'd been reading so much, and I was just like, I'm done. But it's from something. So Delany never finished the sequel, and he says that it is unlikely he ever will. He gave 2 major reasons for stalling out on it. Number 1 was the end of a relationship he was in that was very entangled with the writing of the book. And then also the looming and then spiraling AIDS crisis captured his attention. So he just did not get around to it, and he does not think that he will.
That's like when I'm in relationships and we're watching a show and then we break up. I don't want to finish the show.
It is like that.
The last time that happened was with Chernobyl, and I was like, I don't care how it ends.
Well, Chernobyl blows up.
See, we're fine.
All right.
Jared Harris does a good job in the show. That's all you need to know.
Pro sure.
Time for a plot summary. Wish me luck.
Good luck.
Okay. This book follows 2 characters, Rat Korga and Mark Death. And I know to pronounce it Death because I got the audiobook.
Oh, I was pronouncing it Dieth in my head.
Yeah. Well,
Death Home.
there's a little discussion of how it was Dieth and then it got changed to Death, the pronunciation, even though the spelling stayed the same.
Good to know.
Okay, so the book follows 2 characters, Rat Korga and Mark Death. It opens with a very long prologue about Rat's life on the planet Ryanon. Everybody okay with that pronunciation?
Yeah, that's how I was saying it.
Okay, planet Ryanon.
I hope we don't need to say that name again.
I'll take care of it.
Or it's Ryan and the Fleetwood Mac.
Rhiannon.
That's Rihanna.
Ryan.
Rihanna. Okay. He is basically a slave who sort of voluntarily underwent a brain surgery to terminate his anxieties. Hence the acronym RAT, R-A-T. It stands for Radical Anxiety Termination, and anybody who undergoes this procedure is referred to as RAT. The practical effect was that this terminates basically any emotional reaction to anything, so it renders him kind of an automaton, and he is, after having this procedure, used for manual labor under truly horrible and abusive conditions. And the thing that's sad about it that we'll probably talk about is that he is still aware of suffering. He is aware of when things are right or wrong, but he's unable to have like an opinionated reaction to it. But his awareness is still there, so it is particularly tragic and sad. At the end of his prologue, his planet is engulfed in flames, but he, at the time, happens to be running an errand in a very fancy, hermetically sealed basement, so maybe he survives. So, we leave Ryanon engulfed in flames, and then we move to the focal character for the rest of the book, who is Mark Death, an intergalactic diplomat from a place called Death's Home, which is less ominous than it sounds, on a planet called Velm. Death's Home is basically his ancestral estate, township kind of thing that is historically and culturally significant for a number of reasons that I don't entirely understand. His family is made up of humans and spider people called the Ivelmi, and they play host and history teacher to what is pretty much a steady stream of tourists who are interested in learning about Death's Home. All of this goings-on is set against a complex intergalactic political landscape that I don't really understand, is among the things I don't really understand. But I think that it's important to acknowledge that not understanding is a big part of the point of this book. Ultimately, Rat, who did survive thanks to a rescue and a long and traumatic dip in a Bacta tank, and Mark end up in, for lack of a better term, a romantic entanglement that is based on mathematical sexual compatibility identified by shadowy powers that be known as the web. They have some adventures together on Mark's home planet, and then the web ends up whisking Rat away breaking Mark's heart. And that's basically the plot. As an addendum, I feel like it is important to define what the general information is, because you were going to probably in discussion refer to general information, which the character is called the GI. And it is basically like a Wikipedia, Google search engine that you can draw from basically whenever if you're connected to it. And pretty much everyone is connected to it. Rat is not, importantly. But you can basically think a question and immediately have the answer. You can also learn things and then discard what you learned as soon as you don't need it anymore. So, for example, when Rat is rescued, some of his rescuers, learn via GI how to do certain necessary surgical procedures and medical treatments that he needs, and then they just jettison it when they're done with it. So you have access to all of this information basically immediately. And so, yeah, that's the plot, and that's the definition.
Good job.
Thank you.
That was good.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is not a plot-heavy book. It's an experience.
The parts of it that do have plot, I enjoyed.
It's because I think it makes sense in a way.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if there's one thing I understand, it's like boyfriends having a fun afternoon. You know, I understand that.
Walking into a room. There is dinner.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Goodies from Goodreads.
My favorite is from Charles Harrison on Goodreads. This is just an excerpt, and it's a little bit unfair, but it's also exactly on point. This book is like being frog marched, I'm not sure what that means, through a modern art museum by someone explaining a complex board game. You don't get to play the board game.
A frog march is when you are forcibly pushed through a thing or toward a thing or manhandled.
I mean, the frog in this case, I guess, is us, and the march is
correct.
The podcast. So.
Yep. I had a couple. One of my favorite ones was on Goodreads, and is it literature or is it just badly written?
Is it applicable? Is it not?
Is he just tall?
I also liked, there was another 2-star review on Goodreads by a guy named Brett Glasscock, which I thought was great. It's an incredible feat of literature to write a boring book with a protagonist who has a nail-biting fetish. I mean, he's not wrong.
Okay. Are you done with yours?
I mean, I could keep going, but I looked up some contemporary reviews, and the Kirkus review from the time was an interminable exploration of the abstruse, amorphous, virtually plotless murk set forth an overbearing description and feeble dialogue strictly for Delany addicts.
Wait, did Delany write that?
I was going to say that's very meta.
It's a very abstruse review of an abstruse book.
I mean, maybe they thought they were being clever. All right, I have a 2-star Goodreads review from Greg, and Greg says, I guess I just don't see what the point of writing a book and using the term woman to cover everyone, male or female. I know that it's enlightened, in scare quotes, enlightened, and takes into account the thoughtless way language is used in our day-to-day lives. But really, doesn't using the term woman instead of man just reach the hegemonic end?
I had this one too.
Doesn't it just replace one misuse of language for another, and in the end take away the richness and precision of a word to make it a meaningless signifier? Why not just use the term person?
I think
because
Joyce,
it has the word son in it, is what he says right after that.
Oh, and he's like, man is in the word woman.
This guy was amazing.
Is this Joyce Carol Oates? Who is this?
Oh my God. To which I say, sir, the whole point is to make your mind consider and operate within the opposite of what is the default now. Using woman as a so-called neutral term is not the author's instruction. He's not telling us we should do this. It's just simply a what if to make you consider what we actually do in our real lives. Greg.
And it worked every single time. I was like,
right.
Isn't it weird that we say man and not woman?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the point is that it's not neutral. That's the point. Yep. But like Greg was like, oh no, woman over and over and over again. And he couldn't handle it. And it's like, it's supposed to make you feel weird. That's the point, sir.
And maybe he should think about why it is that it makes him feel weird.
Oh no.
Oh, he's not going to do that.
Why not just use the word person?
As a palate cleanser, I'll give you Clemens' 2-star review. If there is one thing I will take away from this book, it is that in the future, sex is something you do between tasks you need to do.
I mean,
if you're going home quickly, there's always time for a shag.
Yeah. between like the end of the workday and the grocery run. I mean, that's not wrong. Okay. Are we ready to discuss?
Let us.
All right. I want to start us off with some opaque historical context.
Yes.
I was brushing up on my constitutional law last night, guys.
I cannot wait to hear where this is going.
I was having a good time. I had a really good time preparing for this because, like I said, I enjoyed reading about the book. I struggled with the book in some ways, but I really enjoyed reading people's thoughts about it. Okay. So this book was published in 1984, and a lot of the book focuses on gay sex culture, and that's very important, and at the time was groundbreaking that a book was just so open about it. I mean, this is not coded, this is not queer baiting, like this is like, hey, we're two men, we're having sex in this cave, and we're having sex in this sand, and we're having sex in this bed, like that just is. And so it was a really big deal that he wrote this book. And so I think importantly, in 1984, at least in many states, it was illegal for people to be having anal sex or oral sex. And so I was brushing up on my con law because the case of Bowers versus Hardwick was a Georgia case that went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And in that case, 2 men in Georgia were convicted of violating Georgia's law against sodomy. And that Supreme Court case was decided in 1986. And the Supreme Court actually upheld their convictions. Interestingly, the Georgia statute criminalized oral and anal sex between any participants without regard to their sex or gender. So a man and a woman, would have been illegal.
Basically any non-procreative sex.
Exactly. Yeah. But the odious Supreme Court, remind you of anyone, like our odious Supreme Court, the then odious Supreme Court opinion discussed homosexual sodomy at length, to the degree where Justice Harry Blackmun in the senior dissent accused the majority of, quote, almost obsessive focus on homosexual activity, unquote. So that's the context that this book was published in. So I think that that's huge. And I also bet that it was really awkward in the break room at the Supreme Court that afternoon. Also, that ruling in 1986, Bowers v. Hardwick, was not overturned until 17 years later in Lawrence v. Texas, which was decided in 2003. So this book was a big deal. I think it was important, and that's why it is so meaningful to so many people. And then the last thing I'll say on the historical context is that Delany has been quoted as saying science fiction is in dialogue with the present. Sure. And so I think that's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah. And I think it also was meaningful because this was right when the AIDS pandemic was it had already gained a lot of steam, obviously, but it was sort of it's hard to overstate the extreme response against gay men that happened when the AIDS pandemic was happening. And a lot of what you see in this book, the city that Mark lives in has these runs where you basically go and cruise for sex. And, they're very specialized places where people go, based on their proclivities. And the parallel to gay cruising culture and the parallel to, especially in Times Square, which is with Samuel R. Delany has written a lot about the Times Square gay culture and what happened to it.
That's Stephen's favorite book by him, Times Square Red, Times Square Blue. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so like he's written about that. Gay cruise culture and gay bathhouse culture got absolutely demolished by the AIDS crisis and by the backlash against gay culture. And I think that it's really interesting to see this book in that context as well, because it's basically saying this can be a beautiful thing.
Completely normalized in this
exactly.
culture.
Mm-hmm. And those two things going on in the background of this book were a really important thing to keep in mind while you're reading it. And the fact that the procedure that Rat Korga undergoes, part of the reason they do this to him is because he's homosexual and because, there's other things going on in his life, but he's an undesirable because of this. And it's definitely, I think, an analogous to chemical castration and treatment of homosexuality with antipsychotic drugs and things like that. Like, I think all of that is just poured into this book. Yeah. Like, all of that anger against those things are here.
And he was supposed to, so in his society, sex between men was illegal until the age of 27. And he underwent radical anxiety termination at 19 because he was facing another 8 years of being criminalized.
Yep. And he definitely couldn't have sex with a short man because sex between a tall person and a short person was outlawed altogether on his planet. And all he wanted to do was have sex with a short guy.
That's my favorite part because it shows how ridiculous and random and arbitrary like anti-miscegenation laws were. It's like just pick it. Like, what if you have big ears and small
Pick a
ears?
thing,
Like, yeah,
right,
it's just
exactly.
random.
Yeah. And I think this book is rife with that. You know, Mark being a intergalactic diplomat and having to navigate a lot of different cultures, a lot of different social norms, what is polite, what's not, what words mean in different places. The same word may mean something different in different places. So I think the book is a litany of holding up examples of different cultural norms and then pointing out none of them really mean
Look
a whole
how
lot.
ridiculous they are.
And a lot of them are purely oppressive and ridiculous.
I mean, even where Mark's from, they have these, very ritualistic, coded formalities that you go through that, and they sort of titter amongst themselves when people don't do them right, but also it's not good if you don't do them right, you know? But they're ridiculous, and they're held up as ridiculous. And I think that's, it's really interesting. What are you saying about that? Because all of our customs are it's just because we agree that we want to do them.
Everything is made up. Yeah. Everything is made up.
Yeah.
There is no normal. Everything is made up. Amy and I both read this interview with
I read it too.
Oh, you read it too? Okay. All three of us happened upon an interview with porn actor Dale Cooper. He's also is he also an author? They described him as
he's a smarty pants.
Well, they described him as artist, porn star, gentleman thinker, and recent Delany fan. And his name is Dale Cooper, which I love because obviously Twin Peaks. So I kept thinking of him as Agent Dale Cooper. That was with Lambda Literary, and we'll link it in the show notes. But this really great interview that was very thoughtful. What do you guys want to talk about that?
I got specifically that idea about the cruise culture and the Times Square culture and everything came from that interview. I hadn't thought about. Well, I had thought about the runs being analogous to sort of the bathhouse culture, but I hadn't thought about gay cruising culture, which is very much its own thing. And he brought it up in that interview, and he also brought up another really interesting point to me, which was you can download information in this society. You can just sort of ask general information a question, and you get this information, and you can also have parts of yourself erased in this procedure that Rat Korga undergoes. But he makes this really interesting point that your sexuality is sort of inherent to you. You can't the way he puts it is you can't download straightness, in this society, which I thought was really, really interesting, especially during the 80s when it's like he's making this point that this is just sort of this is a part of you. You're not taught to do this. You don't decide to do this. This is absolutely something that's integral to who you are. So one of the things I feel like goes through this book is that there's this idea of that there's a core of who you are, and you're constantly being threatened. That part is constantly being sort of attacked or threatened or eroded by the culture you live in, by information you get, by people who fuck about with your brain. And sexuality is treated as one of those things that's like core to who you are, that's constantly being attacked by laws, by culture, by society, by whoever. And you can only trust your own experience and these transcendent moments that you have to really remind you of who you are, ground you in what's real and what's right, and keep you on your path, right? And I think that there's this chapter where Mark takes Rat Korga dragon hunting, and Korga has this transcendent experience when the hunt isn't to kill a dragon, it's to I don't know how to enter the dragon.
So, Stephen actually mentioned this in his email as one of his favorite parts of the book, and I think it's interesting how the narrative is very cagey about it. That we don't know anything about it. They just keep saying dragon hunt, and so you assume they're going to go shoot a dragon with a bow and arrow and bring home a dragon hide or something, which would not really fit with the character of everything we've read before, but what else do you know about it? And then what they end up doing is basically like warging, to borrow a Game of Thrones term. They basically warg into the dragon.
Exactly right.
And they get to be a dragon for apparently like 2 or 3 seconds, but to them it feels like a really long time, and it's this very intense experience.
Yeah, and I think when you transcend like that, when you come back to yourself, it changes how you see who you are, but also reinforces fundamental parts about yourself. And Rat Korga does the same thing when he first... There's this part in the very beginning of the book where he gets the ability to read books and sort of download books directly to his brain, which the dream, am I right? And he, again, has this sort of transcendent experience where he has this overwhelming desire for information and for knowledge and to read. And it's sort of, I don't know. These parts happen a lot in this book where it's like, you have to ignore all the crap and get to what's real. And that's part of it. The sexuality, I think, is part of all of that.
I want to talk about the rat procedure vis-a-vis consent. I think it's interesting that they make a very big deal out of obtaining verbal affirmative consent, not like a not a yeah, but they need a clear yes from Rat before they will perform the procedure. And they tell him, you know, you're going to be a slave. You'll be happy, but you're going to be a slave. And he comes to them because he's suffering. He's begging for this procedure. He's miserable. And when they give sort of a background of his life, they say, oh, you bounced from orphanage to foster home to jail. It sounds like he's basically living a life of petty crime to survive. Stealing, begging. He was never able to learn to read or do math. And that, of course, jumped out at me because, Haley, you had told me you read that Delany was dyslexic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and so the idea that he is really struggling and suffering and was never able to learn to read, and so he's not able to support himself, and he's had to resort to theft and begging and all of these things that society views as undesirable and as a drain, is because his needs weren't met. I mean, because you hear he wants to learn. He's like, make me like you. I want to read the words and I want to do the numbers. And I want this. So it's not for a lack of desire. It's not for a lack of effort. It's because he needs something that isn't available to him to help him do this. So when they make this big deal about obtaining this verbal consent, I think there's a subtle critique here about how meaningful is consent when the only alternative is ongoing suffering and subjugation. I mean, what are your choices? You know, if there were a choice for therapy and Lexapro, you know, what would you pick that option? If there were more options available to you, or like keep living in squalor and suffering and marginalization, or do this thing where you're not really going to be in charge of your life in any respect, but you won't hurt anymore.
There's a huge thing about that is really appealing.
Totally.
Especially, I think, for anybody who suffers from any kind of like mental health issue, like anxiety, depression, those kinds of things. Like, it sounds really appealing to just wipe it out.
Well, you know what I'm thinking about now that we're talking about this is Severance. Did you watch Severance?
Oh, I haven't watched it.
Haven't seen it.
So the conceit in Severance is you are completely separated from your work self. You have a procedure, and as soon as you step through the door at the office, you don't remember your home life. You don't know anything about it. You don't know who you are. You only exist at the office. And then as soon as you get in that elevator and you leave the office, you're back to your outside world self. They're called a workie and an outie. It's awful.
I think they could have done better there.
So, well, I mean, I think it's supposed to be kind of like cutesy and gross. Like, I think they use cutesy words, and then people are like, oh, a cutesy word. Haven't you kind of enslaved your own psyche?
Like a corporate marketing department came up with this.
But it's interesting because
No offense.
I was watching the first episode of that show, and I was like, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. You never take your work home with you. You wouldn't be worried about anything. But then, of course, as the show develops, you realize how sinister it is. And and then when you realize, like, your workie never leaves work. They have no awareness of anything but being in the office. So it is actually awful and abusive and slavery-ish. And now that we're talking about this, I mean, it's kind of similar.
Yeah, it's like there's something really appealing in it, but at the same time, so in order to achieve this, you also have to get rid of everything that gives you any volition in life, like any kind of desire, any kind of reaction against anything, or any kind of yearning for anything. Like, you have to get rid of them both. And I think I would choose to continue to suffer in order to continue to have that volition in my life. Then you have to keep making that choice, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? And depending on to what degree you're going through something or you're suffering from something,
it's harder
or like you can't get a roof over your head and food on the table. You know, I mean, because it seems like Rat can't.
Right.
He can't support himself without crime or begging, and I mean, that's no way to live.
And they're selling him a bill of goods that sounds pretty good, and the consent they get is very strange because he's asking questions and they're like, just say yes, just say yes. Just say the word yes. And he goes, yes. And then that's it. It's done.
Well, it's not unlike every client I ever had that took a plea bargain, which is 95% of any criminal law case when you have indigent clients. They're like,
yeah,
well, if you can, get 2 years probation now, or if you want to go to trial, you might get 10 years.
Right.
They're like, well, shit, I've got to do this. They don't have money for a lawyer. They've got an overworked public defender. So, like, their consent is not truly valid.
Yeah, it's a choice. It's not a choice. It's exactly the same thing. Woof.
Oh, also, Rat was sterilized as a child, which I forgot. But yeah. I was re-listening. I got the audiobook, and I have some thoughts on that I'll share later. But I got the audiobook, and so I was kind of trying to re-listen to the prologue because I read it like 5 weeks ago. And he received a vasectomy when he was, I think, 13 in the orphanage. So, like, was that up to him? Probably not. And he is a person with disabilities. I mean, they've said that he has some cognitive damage, maybe some type of birth defect, and he's been unable to learn like most people can learn. And so that I think is reflective of it was not unusual in U.S. history, or really probably even today, for people with disabilities to be involuntarily sterilized. They did say it was probably reversible, but they were like, but who's going to want to do that once you're a rat? Like, they were just really...
Right. You're not going to be able to choose to do anything.
Right, exactly.
There's this overarching motif. I don't know if the word motif is correct, but my English major skills are failing me right now. But theme about information and facts and knowledge in this book. And did he invent Google?
Oh, Steven said he thought that it was spookily prescient.
It is spookily prescient. Like, so he invents this. I mean, he invents a ready
instantaneous search engine that's built into your head.
Yeah. And like,
it's Google Glass.
It's Google Glass. He, Joe Walton had she had a sort of a rave review of this book on Tor.com that I read. And one of the things she said was that the only thing Delany got wrong there was that the web isn't the net of 1,000 lies that it is now, basically. Information is reliable when available, but the book was published in 1984 when you could trust a fact. That's interesting to me is that, they sort of ask for information and they don't question the information. But that then led me down this road of like, well, so the web is, which I'm also curious if you coined that term. I have no idea. But the web is this organization?
Yeah,
company, government arm?
I had to look it up.
Okay, and what's the web?
It's vague. I mean, so it said it was like an organization that controls the flow of interplanetary information.
So they make the information, use the information, and also control the information?
I guess.
I don't like that.
I just think of them as a shadowy cabal.
That's dystopian to me.
There's a similar kind of thing in Star Wars called the HoloNet, and it's like...
Oh.
And that came about in the 90s with the expanded universe. It's like just a general flow of information. And I think about this a lot because... part of my job is to write the ads that pop up in Google when you search for something that's not what you're searching for.
Oh, interesting.
It's very dystopian. And I am constantly thinking about what the internet would be like if it weren't in a capitalist society, because Google ranks how you return search engine results based on how much money you pay. And we do bids, and it's very shadowy and weird. And like, it's not the best thing that comes to the top that's vetted kind of like a Reddit post. It's done by money. So people that didn't predict that, or even the 90s internet wasn't based on like this sort of like cash cow mentality. So I think he had a more pure vision of it.
I think you're right. And because that's even when you Google stars in my pocket like grains of sand, you get 45 versions you can buy rather than information about the book, which I think is a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I mean, and Google didn't used to be like that. It would just be like things that other people had prorated as like good. And like, I remember the pure form of the internet, like in the late 90s, when like I was in like rings for like Star Wars information. It was just people putting out information because they loved it.
Yeah.
And it was, whether or not it was true,
message board communities.
Yeah, no, it was just because you loved a thing or you wanted to learn more about a thing instead of I want to sell a thing.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering what the web's angle is, right? So it's like they deal in information. They clearly get a lot of money probably from hooking people up to the web or to the general information thing. I imagine there's some kind of corporation or something. But
I mean, everybody in this book has multiple jobs. So we're certainly not in like a post-work, post-capitalism
They're in a hustle culture.
But I mean, they don't really talk much about money in this book. They do talk about the power of exchange, which I thought was a great way of saying you have money. You have the power to exchange things. But I don't know what the web's angle is in this book. Like they want to keep their monopoly, I assume. And one of the things about Rat Korga that gets them all feeling weird is that he's not connected to GI. He can't be connected to GI, and they can't control him in any way. So they can't control what he knows. They can't control what he does. And rumors start spreading about him, and they can't control the rumors. And so they come in. That's why they pluck Korga off the planet, is because he's just creating this little piece of chaos that they can't control. And it drives them crazy. But what do they do with him?
I think I think it was supposed to be addressed in the second book, of course. So
I want that second book.
I know. I would at least like the notes.
I did find an excerpt of it on some web archive that I'll try and find a link.
Is it like a G.R.R. Martin thing? Like, he's definitely
like
not somewhere. Because he's still alive, right? Or
George or Delany?
Oh, Delany is, yeah. He just retired in 2015 or something like that. But the information thing was really interesting to me. It's like the desire for information, the access to information, what you know, what you don't know. And like, it's all interesting. There's no, but he makes this point, I feel like, in the book that you can get facts, but you can't really get truth. Like, truth is fact plus perception or plus experience, right? Like, truth is something different than fact in this situation. I think that's true.
Amy, the thing you were just saying about how the web can't control Rat because he can't be connected into the GI, I'm not sure that I picked up on that was why they were like so obsessed with him, but it makes perfect sense. But that made me think of the reason that Mark eventually learned when he heard about Rhiannon and how it was engulfed in flames, and he had heard there might be a survivor. So he kind of heard Rat Korga was kind of an urban legend. And so he was asking general information, how many people survived Rhiannon? And it couldn't answer it. And it would like make it slow. And this is like an instantaneous thing where it's like, well, how do I operate on a broken wrist? And then you'll just know how to do it.
Right.
So he's like, what is happening? Like, it's not answering me. And then someone was like, you need to stop asking that question. And it makes a little more sense now that you've pointed out that part of the web's issue with Rat is that they can't plug him in because that's how they control people, by controlling information. But so the explanation that he ultimately gets is how many people survived Rhiannon, and one of his, I think, Evelm friends, who I love every conversation he has with them because I imagine them as just being so sassy, and they're wearing like, they're always a little sassy, and they've got 6 legs.
I want to get back to them because you described them as spiders, and I did not picture them that way, and I want to get back to that.
He calls them spiders, doesn't he?
Yeah, they're spiders.
Well, the spiders
But they have 6 legs.
The spiders are the people who work in the web.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, some spiders work there. But the Evelm are spider people. I think, like, some of them are spidery people and some of them are human people.
But then why does Korga say they look like dragons?
I don't know.
I tried to Google Evelm fan art, and there's not one.
I actually meant to do that when I finished the book, and I forgot.
Because I couldn't picture anything. I was just like, it's just a monster. I don't know.
Because there was this whole point made about how, like, there's this really interesting racial point made about how calling Evelmi dragons is like calling a human a chimpanzee. And that was their cousins. The dragons are their cousins.
Okay. But there's only like 2 sentient species that we're aware of. Humans and Evelm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Evelm look like spiders. Like, not exactly, but they're like 3-legged.
I didn't know what the hell they looked like.
Well,
at the end of the day, I was like, are they cats?
I thought the spider and the web was like a metaphor.
Yeah, I thought web was just like because they're an
I don't
interconnected
know. I didn't
cabal.
understand anything.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure they're spiders. Okay, well, what I was going to say is he keeps stalling out the web because he says how many people survived Rhiannon, and it can't answer because it's like, well, what's the question you're really asking? Because how many people were on the surface of the planet who lived? 0. How many people were physically on the planet who lived? 1 that we know of, but how many people who were on shuttles that took off 15 minutes before? Do you count them as people who survived the conflagration on Rhiannon? Well, that's a different number. Or how many people were on the little like space station right outside it? So they were residents of Rhiannon, but they weren't on the surface of the planet when it happened. Do you count them? And it's impossible to answer that question because that question can mean so many different things. And so I just think the book is filled with moments like that, which is probably why it's so challenging to read, because everything means lots of things, and it's meant to. But I thought that was such a good illustration of the layers that he's building into everything in this book.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. On that note, with things meaning a lot of things, can we talk about how Mark Death, I'm going to keep saying Death because that's how I said it the whole time I was reading the book. Mark Death is a really bad diplomat. I think I had been thinking this when I read the book, but then when I read that interview with Dale, he said it in his interview too. He was like, okay, the Deaths have this friend family called the Feints. The Feints live on another planet. The Feints come over in the beginning of the book. They have this lovely dinner party. Everybody goes home. Everybody's happy. The Feints come back later after some shenanigans with one of their children, and they come to a fancy dinner party. And the Feints are being so super rude. And at one point in the dinner party, there's this ritual where people are supposed to feed each other at this dinner party. And everybody's trying to feed the Feints. And the Feints are just sitting there they're saying the most horrific, insulting things about the people on Velm.
They're
and about
also in these weird physical privacy bubbles that manifest as little thunderstorms.
very
around
strange,
them.
very strange. And like, but Mark the whole time, instead of assimilating what these people are doing, and this is a diplomat, he's supposed to be very good at sussing out what cultural shit is going on. He just keeps trying to shove food in their mouths
Through their little bubbles.
and does nothing, and then it's the strangest moment.
Do you think he's a shitty diplomat because it's the difference in information and knowledge? Like he receives facts about other cultures, he receives facts about their norms, but he's not learning these things through experience necessarily. He's book smart.
Yeah, and his experience with these people is that they're always very pleasant and nice and accepting. And then suddenly that experience is different. These people turn out to be allies only on the surface, and then he doesn't know what to do with that.
Like, so most of his information comes from GI.
Yeah.
And even if he has lived experience, he's probably relying on facts and data that he got from GI. So I think that connects back to the difference in information versus knowledge. And there's the scene where they're dragon hunting where he's sort of like laughing in his head about how Rat doesn't understand the norms of how to meet somebody, and I'm like, what? Why would he?
I bet he's also very well. I might go two ways on this. He might be very unused to explaining things to other people because everybody's has GI,
Totally.
And so he doesn't understand why anybody would do this because they have access to the information. Wouldn't they just know not to do? But then he does sometimes go to worlds where they don't have GI, so I don't know if that's exactly true, but he also doesn't spend a lot of time explaining their own cultures to them when he goes to those planets, so I don't know. It was a strange moment where, and his interactions with Rat Korga are very interesting in that way too. He's sort of always mildly chuckling at Rat Korga instead of explaining anything to him.
I read that dinner scene 3 times, and I don't know what happened.
No idea, man. No idea.
Oh, I got you. Like, they all go into this room. The whole dining room is like a Rube Goldberg machine.
Yeah, like I just couldn't. I think why I couldn't absorb almost anything in this book is I couldn't picture anything.
It was hard to picture a lot of what he described.
I mean,
yeah.
It's like I would read the words, like when you read a page in a book and you're like, you know you're thinking about what you're gonna have for dinner, and you're like, okay, I've got to go back, and I would do that 500 times, but it never made sense.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the things he strung together didn't seem to go.
I know that it was like a fondue party. And I know that there was like hand washing stations, but I don't know.
You wash off your little stick.
I could not put 2 and 2 together.
They were wandering around feeding each other. That's the main takeaway, I think.
I also didn't understand how they had an impromptu formal dinner. And then the Taints all showed up and then were mean. And I was like, why did you come?
So they came to be rude. So
that's weird to me. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I guess I don't have that cultural frame of reference where you go on purpose to be rude. Like, I would just not go.
I mean, the only thing I know is what you know, but that one of the Taints tells Mark that the rudest thing in their culture is to do something that makes someone else be rude to you. And so they were trying to get a rise out of them.
I laughed at that. I thought that was kind of funny.
It was a petty thing. They were being petty LaBelle. Like, Taints show up and they stay in their little angry clouds, and then they go to dinner and they're saying all this awful stuff. And they're just trying to get a rise out of everybody. They're trying to get them to be rude to them because they're just being petty.
So I didn't even pick up that, but describe the room that they ate dinner in, because for me it was an underground, like Game of Thronesy medieval basement.
To me, I don't know that there's a definitive answer to this. I was picturing something with like
no, like I just want to know what you.
Yeah, I was picturing a place with like marble and tiles and columns, and you stand
fancy,
and you stand in a
very
very
dark.
You stand in a very specific spot, because if you don't, then when the food apparatuses pop out of the ceiling and the floor, you could get burned or poked or something like that.
Yeah.
So you had to be very specific about where you stand. And then when everything pokes out of the floor and comes down from the ceiling and the fountains come out, then you go get the food that was previously paraded around so everybody could see, and you start making little skewers and you feed people.
Yeah. Mine
Like
was a combination of like a dingy old earthenware basement combined with in Back to the Future Part 2 when the food comes from the ceiling and there's like grapes and then they put the pizza in the microwave. I don't know, man.
I don't know. Their home was described as being kind of opulent, and so I just pictured it being nice.
But like with yet no details. Like,
yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think Steven said this in his email. He's like, he likes this book partially because nothing's really answered in it. It's all a little bit nebulous. And so I think that's part of what you're supposed to like about it, is that it lets your imagination go.
I appreciate it. I just didn't work for me.
But it's interesting that we picture two totally different things.
Yeah, no,
I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
interesting.
I mean, like for me, the entire book was this very dark, dirty place. It was I got a very oppressive fantasy feeling from it. So.
A lot of things are underground. There's no water.
Yeah, It just didn't it didn't have even like Rat Korga's planet was dark and dirty, and like I'm picturing like the mountains and like the Sierra Desert and like a Star Trek episode or something.
Yeah.
So
Can we move from the dinner party to...
I really liked the dinner party, though.
Okay, do you have more about the dinner
No, I'm
party?
just kidding. We can
Well,
move on.
because we're on the subject of food, to the humans and the Evelm, and they're eating together.
The eating in this book was so grotesque. I don't know what he was trying to do with it.
I'm not able to shift my perspective to appreciate eating food stuck to a giant spider friend's face.
Do you know what the grossest part to me was? When he would describe the Evelmi as having held water in their tongues for days.
Yep.
And then they would all drink out of the tongue.
What's that tongue? A tongue is in a bag.
They have
mouth
so
do?
many tongues. They have so many
So
tongues.
the worst part for me was the part where like the respectful thing to do is like, I think it's something you say, I should have written it down, but it's like an expression of appreciation is to be like, I want to eat the food that lingers below your mandible lip or something. I was just like, oh no. Like again, yes, this is a book about shifting perspectives. This has gone a bridge too far for me, Mr. Delany. I can't deal with it. And as you guys know, I am loath to eat after another human. I will eat after Kevin happily, end of list. And so the idea of eating after my gigantic spider mother who has food, they will like basically pie themselves in the face with the food. And then the children come up and just eat. The adult children, Mark comes up and like eats the pie off of the mom's face. And she's like, I mean... Is it worse that she's a spider friend? Is that my bias? I don't know, man. Every time I was so grossed out.
how about the fact that they eat cloned human meat?
I was going to say.
Oh, I forgot about
Because
that.
that
Long
one
pig.
part, the butcher very pushily comes up and takes a little slice out
Stole
of
some
Gorga.
rat.
He's going to make a little beef out of him.
Okay, long pig versus short pig. Go.
Long pig is a real animal and short pig isn't.
Okay,
No.
so short pig is lab grown
I don't know, I made
human.
that- I made that up. I made that up.
So this is a classic culinary term for cultures that participate in cannibalism.
Yeah, I just don't
Oh.
know what short pig
I don't
is.
know what-
Oh,
I don't
just
know
like a
anything
regular-
about this.
Okay, so like there's some culture that participated in cannibalism or knew about it, and they referred to human meat as long pig, and a short pig is just a regular pig.
Oh, I didn't know a short pig was a regular
Yeah,
pig.
no, long pig is just because like apparently human meat maybe has the consistency of pork.
Or maybe it has longer fibers?
No, long pig just means tall pig means human.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Long pig
can't
is
believe
just-
you didn't
yeah.
know that.
I had no idea. I just made an
As
explosion.
into cannibalism as
Not
you
a-
are.
No.
I am really into cannibalism.
It is an
Today
older
I
term.
learned.
It's a euphemism for human meat.
Fascinating.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's so much more cannibalism
Yeah,
going on
I mean,
than I thought.
I think a lot of, and I've read reviews of this, like, I think he plays with what is discussed, because I think
Yeah.
there's a central conceit that homosexuality for a lot of people is disgusting, and how could you do this? But he's like, everything, like, all sex is weird. We've talked about that. Like, people do weird things with parts and places, and it's only gross when it's someone that you don't love or you're not attracted to.
Or such
and,
a thing, yeah.
Yeah, and the same thing with food, like baby birds throw up their food in their baby duck's mouth, and it's fine. And, we feed with spoons, or some cultures eat with hands, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
it's all just what we think is normal. So
I would lick stones with the Evelmi. I would do that part.
You make excellent points, man, but the eating the food stuck on the face, I just couldn't. Whew.
oh no, there are definitely some things in here that I'm like, I'm just a Republican about. Nope.
Listen, there's a part. There's a few descriptions of sex that are very, very graphic, and I was like, whatever floats your boat. But when they were like, eat the food off of the face, I was like, nope.
A lot of the I had the same problem with his descriptions of the sex that I had with the descriptions of everything else. It's like he describes food that ends up being completely unappetizing. He describes sex that's like the least sexy sex I've ever heard in my life. Although I did appreciate when Rat Korga had sex with an Evelmi and he was like, I never thought I could get aroused by an Evelmi. He's like, yep, you learn something
You
new every
never
day.
So
Oh, go ahead.
we can put this in the show notes. So I was picturing the Evelmi as the spider from James and the Giant Peach.
Oh, exactly. I imagine them as sassy and with boots.
Yeah, this one has a beret, so it's from like the like Pixar type.
I forgot about
or was
that.
it like animatronic James and the Giant Peach?
I imagined all of them as just like having their long legs and their cute boots and a lot of opinions about things, and they're a little quippy.
and then I thought about interspecies attraction, and I was like, I've never been attracted to an animal. But maybe it would be different if something was sentient.
Right.
This is my journey. Cat plus dragon plus bug? Catbird?
Well, and the other thing is, again, about normalizing things. It's not weird to Mark because one or two of his moms are Evelmi. And so it's just like normal to him. Yeah. He sees that person as a person and he sees a human person as a person. So there's nothing gross to him at all. He has grown up as the baby bird barfing in the mouth, exactly. And also drinking from the bottle like humans do. He's done both of those things, so they're equally normal to him. So it's not gross.
Also brings me into another of my favorite things in this book is that you randomly found out he's naked.
Oh, he was teaching his class naked.
I know, he's always naked.
Always naked.
He had space travel naked. Like, being naked is very normal, I guess.
Very destigmatized.
On film.
He must have a very temperate planet, because
I thought the same thing. I mean, I want a blanket even when it's 80 degrees at night. I at least want a light blanket over me. So
space travel naked sounds really cold.
Yeah,
or really hot,
really cold, or really
really dry. Yeah,
I don't know, something. But you'll be trucking along reading, and then suddenly he'll just mention he's naked.
I mean, we do have a very deep culture of shame. Like, there's lots of cultures in the world that aren't as heavily clothed as we, particularly ones that are in warmer climates. But also like protection from dirt and wind. I don't know.
Well, I mean, they went dragon hunting naked, and I just thought, if you have dangly genitals, I would just want them to be tucked, contained in something.
Protect them.
Yeah, like you're walking through the desert and you've got a bow, whatever that means in this context, I'm not exactly sure, but you're putting on some kind of contraption that you aim, and I would just want my dongle and my balls to be like, just in a bag.
I mean, I think
just never understood how men walk around those things not protected.
Well, I think about how in ancient Greece, when they did the Olympics naked, and like the ancient Greek men would like run a 100-yard dash.
Chafing.
Does it hit your stomach? I don't know. I like that. Whatever that means. Like, that's like any word you can substitute. Whatever that. Can we talk about here we go. Rat and his infinity rings that he was wearing.
Oh, yes.
I thought the same thing.
So he has his lobotomy, and then Vonda McIntyre. No, that's Vonda McIntyre's rings.
It's Vondramock. Vondramock Ock, I think.
Yeah, but
I think.
But somehow he comes into contact with her rings, and they make his neuron synapses work again.
Mm-hmm. And she's some ancient ruler, scientific futzer of yore who has some connection to Mark's family. She was like girlfriends with Mark's 7 times grandmother, I think.
7 times, yeah.
And she was kind of either the founder of or a really important person in the family, which is one of the 2 political factions that matter in this book.
So she had tinkered around and
she fucked around and found out.
She had undergone a version of radical anxiety termination by experimenting on herself, and then was like, oh,
I don't like
my bad. And so she made all those rings that have information stored in them. And does that mean that Rat knows everything that she knew? Because she knew was in those?
It's just it's just sort of a brain remapping. Like, instead of having to traverse these synapses, you can traverse those synapses.
I thought there was information in the rings themselves, like, but he can't connect to the GI, so I thought it was like when you use Google Maps but offline.
It just makes a broken brain work.
He was in airplane mode.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the rings are like gold and they have gems in them. They absolutely sound like the Infinity.
He's got a pinky ring.
100%. Yes.
That is another indicator of how important he must be to the web, that they got Ox jewelry. Like, I thought they were going to say, and then we replicated it and gave it to him. But and even Mark was like, that's her. Those are her rings and her bracelets. Like, you have her stuff. And he's like, yeah.
Oh, and then he knew how to turn on.
What? Like, it's hard?
He knew how to turn on Mother Death in her column.
That's why I thought, like, there were some things that made me think maybe he had some information that Ock had that was in those rings. But I don't know.
Could be.
Who knows?
Who knows? I mean, he knew how to turn on the column. Also, trapping someone in a column sounds terrible. It's like when Amy's mom was trapped in the trophy on Buffy.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds awful.
Yeah, she was like, can you turn me back off?
I don't want to do this anymore.
Please kill me.
Are they all living on holodecks?
I don't think so.
Like, because 2 things I couldn't picture were the communication system and the, like, they spend a lot of time in Mark's room, but Mark's room isn't where you think it is.
They can project themselves. So there are people who travel in meat space. Like, for example, the tourists at Death's home. There are people who actually come in meat space and they're physically there. And then there are people who send a Force Ghost projection to Death's home. Like, maybe they don't have the money to physically get
There's
on
a pandemic.
a space plane and go. So they project their Force Ghost and it's there. And it seems like if you were looking at them,
So
you'd
the
be like, oh, you're
place
here.
is there, but they're force projecting themselves.
I think so.
Okay.
I think there are physical participants and there are virtual. It's a hybrid event.
I could not tell.
Some of them are zooming in. I think.
That makes sense. Because, like, sometimes people would walk up, but then there was that time that they were hanging out on the deck and the people who were, like, in the area couldn't see them. So I was like, how is that working?
Oh, I think that was just an angle situation. Like, sometimes you can look down and see someone, but they can't. I thought that was just like a angle of where they were located.
Oh, and you kept explaining it. I was like, still not getting
Yeah, I can't picture spatial things anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't think there was anything like that.
Okay.
I know why they had to do it for the plot of the book, but I can't imagine why a government entity, NGO, would round out someone's attraction to somebody else.
Yeah, I think we would find that out in the second book.
Yeah, why was the web
It's a cool idea.
motivated to hook him up with
Yeah.
Mark at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
We don't know.
I think it's a cool idea that like you have like a physical type. Although then
I would like for someone to go find mine.
yeah,
Matchmaker, yeah. So let me give a little context for that in case people haven't read it. So the web matchmakes Rat after they piece Rat back together. They matchmake Rat and Mark, and we're not sure why they're even invested in this, but they have a mind map basically of everyone, and I guess they're able to do that to Rat while he's in the back to tank, even though he's not on GI. Oh, that was a sentence, and that was like a Delaney sentence.
It was. I was like,
We've transcended.
I'll write the next book. So they figure out, they can identify who is your erotic ideal, is what they call it. And Mark is Rat's erotic ideal out to mathematically out to 9 decimal points, and Rat is Mark's out to 7 decimal points. And I did wonder if that could be a source of drama.
mm-hmm.
You're more perfect than I am, so maybe you're going to step out on me. I mean, I don't know.
We weren't given enough time to find out.
We
Lori.
weren't, and Mark said that. He was like, obviously I wasn't in love.
They
I
were
only knew
very
him for a
cute.
day, but I would have liked the opportunity.
yeah, and it
to know.
only takes into account a physical type, which, as we all know, sometimes is not the best type.
Sometimes you're not. Sometimes
Yeah.
what you want is not what you need.
And what if they're emotionally dickhead? What if they're not smart?
I mean, Rat Korka, by all accounts, didn't grow up with a lot of information, so
That's
I'd be
true.
interested to see how
But they were boning, so
they were death's bone. And they were cute. The absolute relatability of Mark seeing Korga for the first time and running the fuck away. I loved that. Like, he was like, "Oh God, he's perfect," and he like just runs away.
Also, the relatability of when he hooks up with Clem early in the book, and then
Clem
Clem's
making
like,
it weird.
Clem's like, by the way, I'm a murderer. It's my job and my hobby.
Made it so weird.
And he's like booking it to the space station. And I just thought, who among us has not wanted to put a galaxy worth of distance in between a weird date? Can we talk briefly about attraction? It was something that Stephen mentioned that he really likes about the book.
You mean positive factors in your erotic schema?
No. I mean, maybe. But Stephen said something that he really liked in this book is the weirdness of attraction and how it reflects how we really experience life. And Stephen said, when you watch TV now, there is obviously much more same-sex couple representation on TV, but he's like, it's just like kind of two beautiful people being beautiful together and like rubbing their smooth, beautiful selves together. And he was like, that, don't get me wrong. He's like, I don't hate it. It has its place. It's great. And he was like, but real life is like much weirder than that. And we actually we're like taught that we're supposed to be attracted to the smooth, perfect looking people. But in reality, people like a dimply butt, or they like a chewed cuticle. And apparently, Stephen told me that a chewed cuticle was one of Delaney's kinks, actually.
And boy, howdy, is it Mark's.
And boy, howdy, is it Mark's.
it's never impressed anybody I've ever dated.
You have not found a Mark.
Not
You
yet.
need a Mark.
So I like that this book completely destigmatizes what someone is attracted to, whether it is a spider person with food on their face or a human man with chewed up cuticles. Because bodies are gross, like in a nice way. They just are. And so this book does a good job of acknowledging there's you've said, Amy, you've said there's a butt for every seat.
There is a butt for every
And there's
seat.
only so many 4% body fat, hairless men.
Or women.
Or women, exactly, yeah. But like, I think especially like in like gay male cultures, like, you know, you got
that's
like,
true.
I have pictures of my friends that go to Fire Island, and like they all have 4% body fat and no hair, and
I think that's a big problem in the gay culture. I mean, right now it's like this unattainable ideal is a huge thing.
Well, and there's only so long that you can keep up the charade of being smooth and free from smells.
I know.
You know? And I mean, some smells show up sooner than later. Like, I have a lot of smells.
Yeah, but you know, if you are more into like this sort of like anonymous, I'm going to go to a run, it's not really developing a relationship. It's just satisfying an erotic need, which is also important.
I know, and we don't. It's so in America, we're so puritanical here that like that idea is just shame, 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 shame all the time. But I did love Mark's devotion to his particular kink. Like he at the very end of the book, and one of my favorite parts of the book is when he's mad at Japril, the person from the web who took Korga away. He's mad at her because he's heartbroken, and he's just sort of walking around the universe like an empty shell. He kind of got radical anxiety terminated in a way because he doesn't have any reaction to anything that he used to have.
Well, he's deeply depressed, so he has no reactions.
And he talks about how he used to wander around the universe checking out people's fingertips and had the best time. And every fingertip was new and exciting and had held different things and meant all these different things. And now fingertips mean nothing. And it was the saddest thing.
It was really sad. And she was like, "Are you saying you were in love?" And he was like, "No, but I didn't even have the opportunity to be. Like, I was in something intense that you basically create, or like you put me in that situation, and I didn't even have a chance to be. And also, I'd like to bone him again 100 times, you know?"
My understanding is they got to bone again in the next book.
Yeah, I think they are together in the next book.
Yeah. There's a phrase in this book that was just taints and feints. Taints. Taints. Feints.
Oh.
Taints and feints. And that's
Sounds
the title
like a bar.
of somebody's sex tape.
All right. Anything else for general discussion?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Does anyone have a feminist favorite?
I think the pronoun stuff to make men uncomfortable. That was cool.
Yeah. I thought Awk was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, the pronoun stuff. Delany seems to have envisioned a society that is really very egalitarian in terms of gender. If Elmi have 3 genders, they can all become pregnant.
Yep.
I just think like he's made something that we don't see any gender-based stratification, and that's great. Thank you for imagining that. Thank you for imagining women and people who are neither women or men having a place in the world.
When I was reading this for a while, I was like, there's no conceptualization of trans identity in this book, but there absolutely is. Like when I thought about it later, when you just
the language
said
isn't there.
And
the language changes every 10 years right now.
It's like you don't know whether someone's male or female until you get a hint of what their genitals are basically in this book. And so I was like, well, okay. But
it seems more sex-based than gender-based.
Yeah. So I was, in the end, I was fine with it. But I loved that reproduction was spread so evenly, at least amongst the Yvelmi and...
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, if you are a human for whom Yvelmi society is normalized, then I imagine the natural consequence of that is going to be more even child rearing responsibilities and you know, that kind of thing. Like,
I mean, Mark seemed very at home with the children.
Totally.
Like he was,
totally.
I'll just throw out this one other thing. I liked the human woman morning dress on Velm, which was basically just a bedazzled minge.
What's a minge again?
Pubic hair.
Oh, yeah.
Bedazzled merkin.
Yeah.
Oh, merkin, yeah.
And then there was one other thing where he was talking about the etymology of this one word, and he said the D means something between Professor Emeritus, Systems Analyst, and Black Widow.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, yes, it's very Stoop Crone.
Amy, it's like a vajazzle.
It is a vajazzle.
Okay. Does anyone have a misogynist moment? I don't.
No.
Male pronoun still used as object of desire. Didn't love that. I
didn't mind it.
So you switch pronouns in this book. Like everybody's a woman.
Because it's
she,
not
her.
a male pronoun, though.
Yeah, something like it. It's not exactly a misogynist moment.
I think...
Why do we have to switch to he if we love something?
I think it's because a gay man wrote it.
That's fair.
I mean...
Well, and it's
not exactly misogynist. I just didn't...
It gives you a lot of information because... like so every time Mark refers to Rat, he uses the he pronoun. Mark refers to Clem as he, then they hook up, and then Clem starts getting weird, and he goes back to she. So I think it's super interesting because it gives you so much information about how the subjective person is thinking about the person they're interacting with.
It is
I thought it was neat, and I don't think of it as a male or a female
and it's
pronoun.
interesting that you can use that as an indicator that you're interested or hooking up with this person without saying, it's my boyfriend.
What if you accidentally?
That's what I was going to ask. Like, what if you're at work and have a crush on somebody? Like, would you hide it and be
You are
like,
exposed.
oh, she's there? Like she, everybody.
Yeah,
like,
what if
Good
you-
question.
what if
Does it
you're
have
like-
to be mutual?
Oh, is he here yet? And then you're like, fuck.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I feel like, do you have to like purposely use it as like, this is his pronoun because I like him?
It's just another one of those things that he's doing in this book that makes you really think about what you're reading and what the words mean. And I like it.
Well, Korga didn't.
I mean, I could see how it took some getting used to. Boob talk. There's some fun boobs in this. Now, let me preface this with, normally boob talk is like male gaze objectifying. I don't think that's going on here at all. I think Delany is simply describing exactly who's in front of him, but there's some funny boob descriptions.
Well, I wondered if we should do semen sayings or scrotum scuttlebutt
Well, so
or something instead.
I think it's very clear that he does not like boobs because we got heavy breasts. We got breasts emptied with age. We got
Emptied
long,
with age.
flat breasts. Like,
Oddly interesting.
it's never like a hot titty. It's like it's this old emptied with age breast.
My favorite was the emptied with age because this is like a venerated woman who is an older woman. And so he's just describing what she looks like. And he's not like, ew, gross. He's just like,
That's true.
This is what she looks like. She is a this age woman. and
Emptied
this
with
is her-
age is just such a-
It is absolutely a hilarious phrase. But I'm just like not bothered by it.
I still just would never use breast to describe a woman in any form. I don't know.
Yeah, and I thought about that because I have made the point, like, why am I hearing about these boobs? But I will say Delany is really giving details of people's physical experience, like the
That's true.
chewed cuticles. You know,
Yeah.
he's very specific.
But as
Agent Dale Cooper, damn fine cup of
as
coffee.
he tells us, he's a size queen, and you don't get a description of a single penis in this book.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah, you
only
don't.
boobs,
You don't.
which is maybe now my
That's
misogynist
interesting,
moment.
though. We don't get any penis.
You get some scrotum.
I wonder if he was
you get
afraid to
some
be
rectum.
too extreme.
Maybe.
Because like I bet science fiction can already kind of be
This
put
man
aside.
used the phrase, "I made his rectum drink my semen." He can describe a penis.
Maybe.
But I mean, in like movies, you can show a woman's breast, but you
That's
can't
true.
show a
That's
penis for
true.
the longest. So maybe it was an editing, and maybe he did have penises in him there,
Yeah.
and they were like, "Strike the penis."
Maybe he had like 500 penises, and they're like, no, all have to go.
The book was like 40 pages longer. Okay.
For this book, we need to do some like finger fattle. There's so much finger.
So many cuticles.
Also, I was doing like a couple of different word searches. He uses the word heavy like a lot, which is
really?
interesting. Not just with breasts, like because I thought I saw heavy breasts somewhere, and I did, but then like I just started with heavy, and it was like 50 times. Like it's a very heavy book.
Oh, that's like from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah.
Heavy breasts.
All right. Fantastical food.
We talked about the dinner party.
Yeah, but the weirdest fondue party. Again, like it's Delany trying to weird us out. So there's a lot of worms on this planet. So you got
Eating a lot of worms.
nematode milk. You got worm roe. I like the dinner he makes. Like he actually shows him in the kitchen cooking, and it's like a carpaccio decked out for the Met Gala. It's called Hunter's Beacon, and it's just folds of raw meat.
Steak tartare.
Oh, I thought that was so neat because it's all one long piece.
Yeah.
It's like a kind of like a spiral honey baked ham, but you lay it all out in one long piece. I
Different
thought
flavor.
this book had a lot of food in it for a classic science fiction novel.
Yeah, like a bunch of weird food. Like nothing sounded delicious, but
I liked he had the idea of this thing called a kolek, which was a way of cooking food, which sounded really interesting to me. It's basically this big pottery apparatus that has different levels on the inside. Both started yawning when I started talking.
no.
Sorry, boring you. No. It's like these levels on the inside, and the steam cooks the food at different rates.
Oh yeah,
And
like
then
the steam basket.
it was fascinating. I love that idea.
Huh.
And then he just says it was used as a metaphor to describe the city, which I thought was interesting.
And sucking stones are something that the spiders
Stones.
get sustenance from, and people are like, yeah, okay, I'll have a sucking
I'll
stone.
lick your stone. Yeah, that sounds good.
Once again, everything is normalized.
And then they eat people sometimes.
Soap stuff? Boy, howdy.
the whole book.
The whole book, yeah.
A lone survivor because he was downstairs in the wine cellar.
Soul survivor who's now tabula rasa and your perfect erotic object. Come on. It writes
Also,
itself.
The idea that a person can have a mathematically quantifiable erotic ideal and that the powers that be would bring them together for reasons.
I liked the they had this Deus Ex Machina thing with when Rat Korga turns on Mother Death and she tells them how to make the crowd that's about to invade the home go away. She's just like, oh yeah, no, just project yourself on the walls. It's fine. We do it all the time. It was great. I love that part.
All right. Did you like the book?
I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads, but I might go back and give it 4. And like we said before, I like reading about the book, I think, more than I liked reading the book itself. But I liked it. I'm coming down on the side of I liked it.
Okay. Haley?
This was the hardest book I've ever read in my entire life. Saying I don't like it is unfair because it's so good in terms of talking about it, but I have never had a harder time reading a book ever.
It was tough.
Yeah.
Like, his writing is not reader-friendly.
Yeah, like, I would have to read this 2 more times to, I think, really participate well in this discussion.
I think it's a book that I'm sure rewards additional reading.
Oh, 100%.
Jo Walton put it really well, I think, when she said, reading Delany is like pop rocks for the brain. He scintillates, things sparkle and explode all over, so it's not entirely comfortable, but it is quite wonderful.
Yeah,
that was pretty good.
Normally, I would have probably reread half the book today, but I've just been very busy at work, so I didn't have time.
And it's long and hard.
Yeah. No, I just,
Yeah.
I am disappointed in myself for not discerning more. Like, y'all mentioned things, I was like, I don't remember that. I don't know. Nope, didn't get that.
Not every book is going to resonate with everybody.
Yeah,
Well,
it was very hard for me.
I really struggled with the prose a lot, but then last night when I was preparing, I really enjoyed thinking about it.
Oh, yeah, the
I
ideas are great.
enjoyed hearing what Stephen liked about it. That was very helpful to me to see. You know, it's
I
nice
waited
to
to
hear
read
somebody.
his email until today.
It's so good.
It's nice to know what someone else likes about something because that helps you see high points or like things that you might have missed because you were struggling with the prose. You were struggling to be like, what planet? And it turns out like a lot of what's going on in this book, I don't want to say this pejoratively, but I mean, it is kind of noise. Like a lot of the stuff that we're told is not important to understanding the action in the book.
Yeah.
But if you like something that has a ton of details because you like that immersive world building, which is a common characteristic of classic science fiction, there's lots of that there. So I think it's just a personal preference thing. And for me, I get kind of distracted and I struggle with, should I understand what I just read better or am I okay to move on and I'll still understand what's happening? So I do think it's a good book and I do like it, but I did struggle reading it. But thinking about it after was a lot of fun. Talking about it's been fun. And I think some of the dialogue is where he really shines. I love the conversations between Mark and his bestie Santine. I love them.
I did like them too.
Yeah, sometimes it would read like a play because like once I could get into like 3 pages where there's nothing but dialogue, I was like, I know what's going on.
So something that helped me was I did get the audiobook for this, and the narrator is Stefan Rudnicki, and he is a wonderful narrator. He has a beautiful voice, and I had not read any humor in this book. And then when I started listening to the audiobook, his tone of voice would indicate sort of a wryness in the conversations. And then I was like, oh, they're like being a little sassy with each other. They're being a little funny, or they're like pointing out things that don't make sense or being ironic. And so thanks to that, once I picked up the print version, I was reading more for that and paying a little bit more attention for that. And then I was like, okay, this book is not as dry as I thought it was.
My only beef with the dialogue is when he would have vast monologues wherein instead of showing he was telling,
which is also not unusual in classical science fiction.
And I was like, well, why, this could have been a scene. Like we could have watched this happen. Instead we get a retelling.
And I think that would have made more sense. And I think I texted you on the group chat. Like I imagine my experiencing with this book is like a lot of people reading Moby Dick. They're like, nothing matters. This is pointless. I don't like it. Whereas like,
it's just whether you like the prose or not at that point.
Yeah, like I think I struggled more with the prose because the ideas, again, fantastic. I love talking about the ideas and reading about it, and Stephen's letter have been great. But the act of doing it, I felt like the dumb jock in class. I was like, hey, don't want to read this. But I did. Not great. I tried my best.
You did great.
You did great.
I would have moments of clarity in this book, and I'd be like, I know what's happening.
Don't beat yourself up. Yeah. I think it's a tough book.
It was tough. It was tough. And I think, like, afterwards, I would, like, finish reading it, and then I would go back to reading my men's adventure fiction series that I'm reading, and it's just like, sentence after sentence.
I'm really looking forward to going home and reading Murder in Coweta County, the book we're reading for our book. Because that's so easy.
So I started reading Nona while I was reading this, but I was like, I can't read Nona and this. I can't have 2 books where I'm like adrift at sea.
I just got Babel in the mail. I'm really excited.
I was reading House of Leaves. I was like, I have no idea.
Where am I?
pick up is attacking
Words don't mean anything anymore.
Whatever that word means.
One thing, another note on the audiobook that I want to mention is that while I think it is wonderful, if you can read the print version, I would recommend either reading that first or doing them side by side, because there are so many words in this book that are made up words.
Yep.
And so I think if you only listen to the audio, you might be like, what was that? Because you haven't learned that word yet, or you don't know what it is. Now, there may be people who are like more practiced at listening to audiobooks who might be able to suss that out. But for me, when there were words that I didn't recognize, I would be like, is that just a word I don't know? And there were a lot of words in the book. I was reading it on my Kobo and I can look up words. And so I'd be like, is that just a word that I don't know? And I'd click on it and it would be like, dictionary, no results.
He also does some stuff with typography in the book, which I think you'll miss out on if you do the he has a way of typographically showing you how the Avelmi talk out of several different tongues at once.
Oh, really? Yeah,
I don't have that in my
that wasn't
ebook.
in the ebook, yeah.
Oh, let me show you.
But it is in the audiobook. I thought I was going crazy because
Aw.
there are parts in the audiobook where the narrator is talking at the same time. I hear his voice overlaid over his voice. So they do that in the audiobook.
Oh, that's really interesting.
But it does not exist in my ebook. So I think if you have the option, I think that the audio and the print, and apparently get actual like paper print, are great companions. Oh,
interesting.
I had that. I just didn't realize that's what that meant. Okay, never mind. That was a me issue, not a typography
It wasn't
issue.
in my ebook. It was just like
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But okay, so Stefan Rudnicki, when he was narrating, would say those things at the same time simultaneously.
Fascinating.
Yeah, he's a really wonderful narrator. He did Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead as well. So yeah, I think if you like audiobooks, I think it is totally worth listening to if you're interested in this, but I would say have the print version if you can read print on hand to compare, because I think it could get confusing. Okay, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings? Pass. I pass.
I'm going with Star Wars because it does the same thing that Star Wars does, which is where there's this like really cool realized galaxy out there, and it sort of brushes up against showing you kind of what's out there. But
6,000 planets.
But you never get the full picture. You just get these little glimpses of like these other worlds. So I'm going with Star Wars for that reason.
Lord of the Rings because there's dragons.
Fair.
Okay, fair.
And an impressive fantasy feeling.
Okay.
Although I think that honestly, maybe it's just everything everywhere all at once.
All right.
There's holodecks. Maybe it's Star Trek.
Coming up next time, the Event Horizon Spooky Special.
Woo-hoo!
We'll be releasing that around Halloween. We're going to go see it. It is actually playing at our local independent movie theater, and we're going to see it someday. We haven't decided exactly which one. And then in November, we will be doing Novella-vember, and we need to pick them. And so we're going to do that soon, but we're not going to do that right now while we're recording. But we're going to do that very soon, and we will post to social media what we're going to be reading.
Dope.
Okay. And maybe for people who don't follow us on social media, I'll put it in the show notes for this episode, because we're going to decide.
Yes.
And thank
Now.
you, Stephen, for this great recommendation.
Yes, this was a challenge.
Thank you, Stephen.
But we learned a ton. There's so much to this book.
You're my favorite English teacher. Now don't tell all my other favorite English.
And I never would have read this without this recommendation. So
100%.
I am glad to have had the recommendation and the prompt to read it. So thank you again.
Hooray.
And thank you for being a friend.
Do-do-do-do-do-do.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye. I would like to know his thoughts on Samuel R. Delany's Hog.
What?